He was once a loving father, a respected man until one winter night, when he walked into a farmhouse with a rifle in hand, didn't stop firing until 3 generations of his family were gone. He hunted his daughters through the halls, shot his wife's grandmother where she stood in the kitchen, pulled the trigger on his wife as their 10-year-old son looked on, terrified, helpless, still alive. Only one child survived to tell the story. This is the tragic story of Kahler family. Welcome back to Chilling Fireside Stories, where I tell true crime stories with the utmost care and respect for the victims and bearable for my community. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It truly helps me continue bringing these important stories to you. These cases deserve to be remembered. Now, settle in and let's begin. In the quiet city of Weatherford, Texas, lived the Kahler family, a household admired by many and often described as the embodiment of the American dream. At the center was James Craig Kahler, who preferred to go by Craig, alongside his wife Karen, their 2 daughters, Emily 18 and Lauren 16, and their 10-year-old son Sean. Craig and Karen's story began years earlier, when they met at Kansas State University. Craig was in the final year of his engineering degree, while Karen had just begun her academic journey. Both were bright, ambitious, and deeply connected, so much so that friends often saw them as the couple to aspire to. After graduation, the two married and welcomed their first child, Emily. Then, in 1999, Craig was offered a prestigious and well-paying position as the utility director of Weatherford, a role that came with both financial stability and community respect. The family settled into a beautiful home and expanded, welcoming Lauren and Sean. Neighbors described them as pillars of the community, always present, always kind, with Karen known for baking cakes and preparing meals for newcomers, making everyone feel welcome. Emily went on to study at the St. Louis College of Pharmacy, while Lauren excelled as an honors student at Columbia High School. Both girls were musically gifted, performing together in a local band and often showcasing their talents around town. To those who knew them, the Kahlers were not just a family, they were an ideal. But beneath the surface, things were beginning to unravel. One day, Karen reached out to her sister Lynn, revealing the painful truth about her marriage. Over the years, Craig had changed. What once felt like partnership had turned into control. Karen confided that Craig had begun imposing curfews and giving her a tightly monitored allowance, demanding receipts for even the most basic purchases, including groceries. He insisted on intimacy every night at exactly 8 p.m. and structured her daily tasks with timers, leaving her feeling more like a prisoner than a partner. She said she complied with everything just to keep the peace, but the fear and emotional exhaustion were growing unbearable. Desperate for something of her own, something Craig couldn't control, Karen decided to join a local gym during the hours when the children were at school and Craig was at work. What began as a quiet escape soon blossomed into a passion. She was there often, eager to learn, and eventually, she was hired as a fitness instructor, a career shift that brought her genuine excitement and a sense of independence. To her surprise, Craig didn't object. In fact, he approved of her new routine, telling her that as long as she returned home on time to care for the children, he had no issue with it. But everything changed when Karen met Sonny Reese, another personal trainer at the gym. From the moment they connected, the two became inseparable. They shared interests, spent long hours together, and before long, their friendship evolved into a romantic relationship. According to Lynn, Karen had been emotionally worn down for so long that when someone finally treated her with care and respect, without trying to control her, the connection felt natural, even inevitable. Karen eventually decided to tell Craig the truth. But instead of reacting with anger or heartbreak, Craig responded in a way no one expected. He seemed unfazed, almost intrigued. He began messaging Sonny directly, sending her flowers, and even suggesting a threesome, viewing the situation as a chance to revive their marriage and spice up their sex life. He told Karen he didn't mind the affair as long as he was included and she didn't leave him. But Karen and Sonny had no interest in becoming a throuple. They wanted to be together, just the two of them. Craig, now humiliated and rejected, realized that Sonny would never be part of his marriage, and he demanded that the affair end immediately. But Karen refused. She continued seeing Sonny, and it became clear that she was emotionally and mentally out of the marriage. Craig, desperate to regain control, decided the only way to stop the relationship was to uproot the family entirely. He began searching for a new job in a different city, one that would allow him to start fresh and remove Karen from her new life. In June 2008, the Kahler family packed up their lives in Weatherford, Texas, and relocated to Columbia, Missouri, where Craig had secured a prestigious new position, one that made him the highest-paid employee in the city. He hoped the move would mark a fresh start, a reset for his crumbling marriage, and more importantly, a way to sever the growing connection between Karen and Sonny. With nearly 700 miles now separating the two women, Craig felt confident the affair would fizzle out. But it didn't. Despite the distance, Karen and Sonny's relationship continued, sustained through emails, phone calls, and text messages. They even managed to sneak in visits, meeting halfway whenever they could. The emotional bond between them only deepened, while the marriage between Karen and Craig deteriorated further, becoming toxic, volatile, and increasingly unsalvageable. That New Year's Eve, the Kahlers returned to Weatherford to attend a party with old neighbors, many of whom were present, including Sonny. Throughout the night, guests noticed Karen and Sonny together, and it was no longer subtle. What had once been a private affair, known only to Craig, Karen, and Sonny had now become glaringly public. Craig was humiliated. A heated argument erupted between him and Karen, one that escalated as soon as they left the party. Karen later claimed that Craig shoved her so forcefully she hit her head on the street. The atmosphere had soured. Friends and neighbors were now openly talking about the couple's unraveling relationship. Just days later, Karen told Craig she was filing for divorce. She began legal proceedings and moved into the spare room. Craig, desperate and erratic, spent hours calling Karen's family and friends, one day pleading with them to convince her not to go through with the divorce, and the next accusing her of leaving him for another woman, trying to steal his money, and planning to take the children away. Sonny, now fully involved, began contacting Craig directly, urging him to leave Karen alone and telling him plainly that Karen had never been happy with him. By March 2009, tensions had escalated to the point of physical violence. After another fight, Craig was arrested. He told police he had merely hugged Karen tightly, but Karen reported that he had grabbed her violently, leaving visible bruises. In her formal statement, she wrote, "Over time, it has become apparent that Craig is controlling. I have learned along the way that he is capable of using force. The issues vary, but I figured out how to keep things from becoming ugly. When money was a problem, I wouldn't tell him what things, groceries, clothing, etc., cost. When it was about sex, I decided it was easier to give him what he wanted every night than to refuse. On occasions when I did refuse, he has been known to be forceful and mean. I'm afraid it will escalate so far that someone is going to be seriously hurt." Karen pressed charges and moved out of the house with the children. From that point on, Craig's behavior became increasingly unstable. He withdrew from his daughters, Lauren and Emily, and insisted on only seeing his son Sean, claiming the girls had betrayed him by siding with their mother. His anger intensified when Lauren and Emily expressed support for Sonny and said they were simply happy to see their mother happy. Craig was enraged. He began referring to his daughters as rotting corpses. Friends reported that Craig started stalking Karen, sneaking into her home to install hidden cameras and hacking into her emails. Police were called again when Karen discovered Craig had slashed her car tires and was ripping out cables from around the house. At work, Craig's behavior deteriorated. He would repeatedly show colleagues old family photo albums and leave the office without notice to check on Karen's whereabouts. His manager, Bill, quietly asked him to resign in September 2009, citing that Craig's personal issues were affecting his focus and performance in ways that were unlikely to improve. Craig was given 2 months' salary and 1 month of severance, and with no other job prospects on the horizon, he moved back in with his parents. Though legally separated, Craig still owed Karen over $3,000 a month in child support. Then came Thanksgiving 2009. Karen, along with Emily, Lauren, and Sonny, spent the holiday at her sister Lynn's house. 10-year-old Sean, however, spent it with Craig. Wanting all her children together for the holiday season, Karen planned to take Sean to visit her grandmother Dorothy the following day. Dorothy, 89 years old, lived in a quiet farmhouse in Burlingame, Kansas, a small town with fewer than 1,000 residents. Despite the many arguments and confrontations between Karen and Craig over the affair, she was determined to make the visit happen. But on Saturday, November 29th, everything changed. Just after 6 p.m., Deputy Sheriff Nathan Perling was finishing paperwork in his office when a call came in from a resident in Burlingame, Kansas. The caller reported a suspicious vehicle speeding around the neighborhood. They had seen a man exit a small truck, walk down the road, and return carrying a large, unidentified object. Concerned he might be stealing, the couple grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside to confront him. But before they could reach him, the man placed the object in the back seat, got into the vehicle, and drove off. Deputy Perling headed out to investigate, but within minutes, a second call came in. This time was made by 16-year-old Lauren Kahler, wounded, terrified, and reaching out for help. What you're about to hear is a fragment of pain captured in real time and may be upsetting to some viewers. And then a third caller soon followed, reporting something truly harrowing. A 10-year-old boy had appeared at their front door, crying and begging for help. It was Sean Kahler, and what he said sent chills through the dispatcher's line. There had been a shooting at his great-grandmother Dorothy White's house. Officers rushed to the scene, bracing themselves for the worst. But nothing could have prepared them for what they found inside. The first person they discovered was Dorothy, lying on the kitchen floor, bleeding heavily from multiple gunshot wounds. She was still alive, but barely. In the dining area, they found Karen Kahler, already deceased, having been shot twice. In the living room, 18-year-old Emily was found behind the couch, also shot twice. Investigators believed the second shot had paralyzed her instantly. She had likely been trying to hide when the gunman entered. Then, from upstairs, Deputy Perling heard a faint voice calling out for help. It was Lauren. She was gravely wounded, but still conscious, still hanging on. Her voice faint, her body broken, but her will to live refusing to let go.
Make me alive. I don't want to die.
Who did this to you?
And right there she replied, "My dad." Dorothy, though barely able to speak, also identified Craig Kahler as the shooter. Tragically, Lauren succumbed to her injuries shortly after arriving at the hospital. Dorothy continued to fight for her life, but her condition was dire and hope was fading. That left one survivor, Sean, who had witnessed far more than anyone realized. Sean later told authorities that he had been cleaning old coins with his mother at the kitchen sink when Craig entered through the back door, carrying a rifle. Without warning, he fired at Karen. Sean ducked and ran, escaping through the back door in a panic. Desperate to help, he circled around to the front, hoping to re-enter the house and reach his mother's phone. But as he opened the door, he heard more gunshots and saw Craig moving through the house. Terrified, he closed the door and ran for help. Police immediately issued an alert to locate Craig. Not long after, a resident reported seeing someone abandon a vehicle in a remote area and flee down a deserted road. The description matched the truck seen earlier that evening, and authorities were confident it belonged to Craig. Inside the vehicle, they found ammunition, unopened anxiety medication, and a backpack containing soap, towels, toilet paper, cotton balls, and canned food, suggesting Craig had prepared to go into hiding. But Craig himself was nowhere to be found. And amid the chaos, one haunting question lingered. How could a father do this? Deputy Sheriff Nathan Perling, the first to arrive at the scene, would later describe it as one of the most devastating crimes Osage County had ever witnessed.
The biggest thing for me, and that I still have no answer for, is how a father can do that to his children. He literally had to chase one of his daughters through the house.
Deputy Sheriff Perling stayed by Lauren's side, refusing to leave her alone as paramedics rushed to the scene. In her final moments, Lauren looked up at him and said the words that would confirm everything. "It was my dad." The community was stunned. No one could have imagined that something so brutal could happen in their quiet town. After an intense 8-hour manhunt, Craig Kahler was finally located around 7 o'clock the next morning. He was wandering along the side of a remote road, looking disoriented, lost, and disheveled. When officers approached, he didn't resist. He simply turned to them and said, "I'm the guy you're looking for." Craig admitted he was armed with a revolver and carried pocket knives, along with hundreds of dollars in cash, gloves, a flashlight, and a hunting bag, items that suggested he had prepared to flee or hide. He was arrested without incident and taken into custody. During questioning, Craig was surprisingly open. He spoke freely with detectives, offering details and reflections that only deepened the tragedy.
"This doesn't look really very good, as you I'm sure can well understand. And
I messed up. Obviously, it's the Sonny connection. I said, I'm just so happy. If there's something you wanted to try, just don't want to lose you in the process. Just be careful.
Right.
Try to be nice about it.
So what happened?
It just became just a relationship. Took over. They were sitting together and rubbing each other's leg, and just making a spectacle, and it just got out of control.
He admitted that the situation had overwhelmed him, that he was struggling to cope with the unraveling of his marriage, the affair, and the loss of control over his family. He spoke about the New Year's Eve party, where Karen and Sonny's relationship had become public, and how the two would sneak away for visits out of town. What disturbed him most, he said, was learning that his daughters not only approved of the relationship, but had traveled with Karen to meet Sonny. He described moments that felt humiliating, watching Karen and Sonny sit together, touching each other, making what he called a spectacle. He recalled being told that his daughters had stayed in the same hotel room with them. When asked if that made him angry, he replied, "I wasn't angry, just frustrated." But frustration had turned into something far darker. Craig Kahler was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and aggravated burglary. His bail was set at $10 million. Then, just after 4 p.m. on December 1st, the final blow came. Dorothy White, the family's beloved matriarch, succumbed to her injuries and passed away. In December 2010, the courtroom in Osage County became the center of one of Kansas's most harrowing trials. Craig appeared in court for his preliminary trial, where he entered a plea of insanity, the only defense available to him against a capital murder charge. His legal team argued that he had suffered a complete mental breakdown, triggered by Karen's affair, the collapse of his marriage, the loss of his job, and the humiliation of moving back in with his parents. They pointed to the unopened medication found in his car, his erratic behavior, and the fact that he made no attempt to cover up the crime as evidence that he was not in a sound state of mind. But Kansas law had changed. In 1995, the state passed legislation that revoked the traditional insanity defense. Under the new law, defendants could no longer claim that mental illness made them incapable of distinguishing right from wrong. Instead, they could only argue that their mental health prevented them from forming intent or acting with premeditation. Craig's defense team argued that his psychological state was so fractured that he had not premeditated the murders, that it was a moment of complete emotional collapse. They claimed he was suffering from depression, hallucinations, and a combination of obsessive-compulsive, narcissistic, and histrionic personality disorders at the time of the killings. But the prosecution pushed back hard. They argued that Craig's actions were deliberate and calculated, that his behavior over the previous year had shown a clear pattern of escalation. From stalking Karen, to sabotaging her property, to installing cameras and hacking her emails, they believed this was not a snap decision, but a slow, methodical build-up to a horrifying conclusion. Their expert psychiatrist acknowledged Craig's clinical depression, but maintained that he was still fully capable of planning the murders. And they pointed to one chilling detail: Craig had spared his son Sean. To the prosecution, that was proof of intent, proof that Craig had made choices, and proof that he knew exactly what he was doing. Though Sean Kahler had stood just feet away from the violence, his father had spared him. And to prosecutors, that choice was telling. It showed intent, not impulse. It revealed a man who was in control, who made calculated decisions in the midst of unimaginable horror. To drive that point home, the prosecution brought forward their star witness, Sean himself, now 12 years old. Appearing via video link, he bravely recounted the events of that night. His voice was steady, his words clear. Those in the courtroom described him as far more composed than anyone could have expected from a child his age. "My dad came through the door and shot my mom," Sean said. "I just heard her collapse on the floor. I think she was holding her leg." The courtroom fell silent. Some people wept. Others had to look away from the crime scene photos, which were so graphic they were described as physically unbearable. Sonny Reese also testified, describing Craig and Karen's relationship as deeply abusive. She said she had tried to protect Karen and that Craig had initially welcomed her into their lives, encouraging the relationship until he realized Karen was truly leaving him. Sonny admitted she had no physical evidence, but her testimony echoed what Karen had confided in her. On August 25, 2011, after just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict. Craig Kahler was guilty of capital murder. His plea of insanity was rejected. He now faced either life without parole or the death penalty. During the victim impact statements, Sean spoke again, this time with heartbreaking clarity. "I do not want my dad to receive the death penalty," he said. "It would be hard on my grandparents. I do not want my whole family gone." Another week passed before the sentencing was announced. When it came, Craig showed no emotion, no sadness, no remorse. The judge delivered the sentence: death. Craig had opted not to speak on his own behalf. He even asked to leave the courtroom before the victim statements were read. But Chief Judge Phillip ordered him to stay. Lynn Denton, Karen's sister, spoke of her grandmother, her nieces, and her sister.
I loved Grandma White, Karen, Emily, and Lauren very much, and will miss them until the end of my days.
Play that frightening night over and over in my mind, just like watching an old movie reel. When I get to the ending, I try so hard to rewrite it, but there's no such option.
That statement, read by a representative for the Attorney General's office, came from Karen's mom, who's also Dorothy's daughter, of course, and Lauren and Emily's grandmother, a woman who saw 3 generations of her family wiped out in just one day. Kahler's attorneys say they will file a motion to withdraw that death sentence, and Kahler will be appointed an attorney for his automatic appeal to the Kansas Supreme Court. Lad Egan, KRCG News, now back to you.
In the courtroom, those who had watched Craig closely said he seemed almost proud. He smirked, he muttered sarcastic comments. And as he was escorted out to begin his sentence, he turned to his parents and shouted, "Take care of Sean so he's not raised by a bunch of freaks." While on death row, Craig began writing letters to various people, including the lead prosecutor. In those letters, he expressed no remorse. Instead, he claimed to feel relieved, saying he had freed Sean. The case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court in 2019, seeking to overturn the conviction by challenging the constitutionality of Kansas's limited insanity standard. But in 2020, the court ruled 6-3 that Kansas law does not violate federal rights, meaning Kahler's execution remained on the books. James Craig Kahler remains on death row in Kansas, a painful reminder that legal system debates over mental illness don't always protect victims. This case shattered lives, parents, daughters, a grandmother, all executed over jealousy and control. It lays bare how toxic entitlement and unchecked mental decline can lead to irreversible horror. As mental health, family dynamics, and legal responsibility continue to intersect, the question remains, was justice served? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching Chilling Fireside Stories. Until my next video, stay safe and look after your loved ones.